Welcome back to Al Lang Stadium, where the Dunedin Blue Jays are beating the St. Pete Cardinals 4-2. How'd I do?
Not bad for a rookie.
I feel a little intimidated next to this veteran former sportscaster. In any case, earlier in the program, we rated the other cities and other parts of the country. But how would we fare here in Florida? We're up against Miami and Orlando.
And for the answers to those questions, we will head back to Cleveland, where Chris Thomas is standing by. Chris, good evening.
Good evening, Gail, and thank you very much. A real dogfight in the Sunshine State as Orlando and Miami try and snatch a team away from Tampa Bay. Rod Challenger has covered this story literally for a decade. He's been hanging around hotel lobbies at baseball meetings for 7 years. Rod, what has Tampa Bay gone through so far to get to this point, to get a team?
Well, the reason I've been hanging around so long is because no community has been after a baseball team any longer than the Bay Area. Now, that alone doesn't put it in the driver's seat, but it's what the community has done during that time that gives it the edge. The $110 million Florida Suncoast Dome is the result of perseverance and planning that began in the early 1970s. It was built despite baseball's recommendation that doing so could hurt chances to get a team. It stands now as the nation's newest stadium, in place and ready for baseball, and brings credibility to the effort to bring a major league team to the Bay Area. That credibility came when the Dome won the endorsement of the Chicago White Sox. In 1988, the Sox, tired of aging Comiskey Park, were looking for a new place to play. They were set to come to the Suncoast Dome, but stayed put only after last-minute arm twisting by Illinois Governor Jim Thompson convinced the Illinois legislature to build the team a new stadium in Chicago. But that near move proved Tampa Bay was accepted by the baseball community, says Assistant City Manager Rick Dodge, who's heading the effort to get a team.
They looked at all the other areas under consideration. They had decided that this area, this facility, was the best place for baseball to come.
There's also the acceptability of the ownership group headed by Tampa car dealer Frank Morsani. He won baseball's approval to purchase 40% of the Minnesota Twins, then won baseball's gratitude by selling it back to a Minnesotan. A similar saga unfolded when Morsani bowed out of efforts to buy the Texas Rangers in favor of Texas ownership of that team. With 2 million people, the Bay Area is the nation's 13th largest TV market, larger than all other areas seeking a team except Washington, D.C. The White Sox learned that broadcast revenues here would be among the highest in baseball. And there's no competition within 500 miles in this, the nation's 4th largest state. Community support has been proven with nearly 25,000 season ticket reservations sold in a mere 30 days, more than any other area. The Bay Area, once divided, now has its civic and political leaders united in the quest for a team.
And so we have the state-of-the-art facility ready in the best marketplace with a terrific ownership group and a great broadcast market, all wrapped up, and those are the ingredients that baseball is going to look at most thoroughly in terms of making a good business decision about where to expand.
So for all of those reasons, the people seeking a baseball franchise in the Bay Area believe that they are one of the 2 sweepstakes winners.
Thank you, Rod. You know, many of us feel that the Sunshine State is a lock for one of these expansion franchises, but can Orlando or Miami take that team away from Tampa Bay? Mark Strassman is in Miami, and he joins us live to tell us that those cities will give Tampa their best shot. Mark?
Well, good evening, Chris and everyone from Miami, where the folks here, like the folks in Orlando, have held off building a baseball stadium until the owners announced the 2 winners in their expansion sweepstakes. And in part, they say they've held off because they can then tailor that stadium to suit the preferences of baseball. Natural grass, for instance. This then is the tale of 2 other Florida cities, how they're pursuing what they want just as badly for their community as we want for ours, and that's an expansion baseball franchise. In Orlando, you might call it the magic touch. If magic tricks work more than once and brought you expansion basketball, then why not expansion baseball?
And now I think this area believes that they can accomplish anything.
Pat Williams wants to run both for Orlando.
We know what's involved and we know how competitive it's going to be, but our community is geared and ready to make the run.
Along the I-4 corridor, Orlando sees its baseball fan base, claiming that more people live within a 125-mile radius than any other southeast city. This kingdom of tourists, the thinking here goes on, will give a big hug to baseball.
think it's something different than just the Disney area, which is outstanding in itself, but it'll add, something else.
From its minor league team, Orlando's major league team would take its name, the Sun Rays. From the city itself, the commitment to build a stadium through a resort tax, and from its basketball team, the same management and ownership, the magic touch and the Midas one.
I'm a baseball fan. As a business person, we think there's an opportunity here.
William DuPont III, an heir to one of America's great family fortunes, now sets his sights on one of America's great family traditions, baseball.
We have a track record of successfully hatching, if you will, a major professional sports franchise in this town.
Miami is a different expansion ball game altogether. Not so much of a benches-clearing brawl as it is just a stormy clubhouse. There's the city's own pitch for an expansion team, 2 competing ownership groups, each led by a self-made multimillionaire, and 5 possible stadium sites. Expansion baseball here has become a debate that is much like Miami itself, brash, noisy, colorful, and interesting. Miami's edge for expansion may lie in its Latin community, their numbers, their passion for the game, their appeal to a touchy issue for the big leagues.
This is the only minority application for a major league team.
Abel Holtz, chairman of Capital Bank in Miami. Holtz heads one of the rival ownership groups here.
I've been a baseball fan since I was born. Since 1941, I have been following the New York Yankees, and I hope to follow the Miami Amigos now.
Miami has professional sports traditions, old and new. But a basic lesson of sport may be lost on the city's expansion baseball hopes, the value of teamwork. I asked the major players in both cities whether their real purpose was not to win a team this time around, but in effect to make enough noise to be considered for a franchise in baseball's second round, whether they were conceding this time around to Tampa St. Pete. And in both cities, the answer was no. They believe that their chances are as legitimate as anyone else's, including our own in the Bay Area. And now let's go back to Cleveland and Chris Thomas.
Mark, thank you very much for the report. Now it's time to get out the scorecards again, and I want to tell you first of all that these numbers do not necessarily reflect my editorial content or judgment, but merely are a compendium of editorial board expression. In other words, a couple of people. Now let's do it. Here we go. None of the Florida candidates is near Major League Baseball, so all cities scored 3 on geography. The ownership question is a tighter question because Frank Morsani and William DuPont are ready to lay out the cash. Miami has the money, but maybe no unified effort to back it up. We'll find out later in the show. Score Tampa Bay and Orlando 3s and Miami a 1, despite Orlando's claim that they can draw fans from as far away as Tampa. The fact is Miami and Tampa Bay are self-contained, large metropolitan centers. Score Tampa Bay and Miami 3s, Orlando a 1. What might prove to be the determining factor in this struggle for Major League Baseball is the Florida Suncoast Dome. More than any other Florida city, St. Petersburg is ready now to play ball. Score Tampa Bay a 3, Orlando and Miami a 1. The totals. Tampa Bay comes out a winner with an overwhelming advantage. So what does really all of this mean? Does Tampa Bay have an advantage over its competing cities? Here to help answer some of those questions, an esteemed panel of nationally acclaimed baseball experts. Joining us from USA Today and a CNN baseball analyst, Hal Bodley, and a writer for the Sporting News for 9 years, the National League expert for the Sporting News, Dave Nightingale. Also joining us live from Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia, a man who has just had published a tremendous book called Men at Work about the game of baseball, a man best known for his nationally syndicated political columns, but one of the great baseball fans, believe me, in the country, George Will. George, I know you're with your son. It's supposed to be a night off, so we thank you for taking the time to be with us. What I'd like to ask you first is, why does baseball traditionally drag its feet and drag out this process of expansion? Why can't it get done?
Well, for several reasons. In the first place, you have a lot of claimants, so there's kind of gridlock in deciding how to make what are, after all, fairly fine decisions, as your scorecard that you just tried to give indicated. Second, baseball is very concerned about acting so quickly that it puts on the field a product that simply isn't of major league caliber. The problem with expansion can be put in one number. 2 new teams requires 20 major league pitching arms. And since today you have about 20 major league teams playing that have often only 3 genuine major league pitchers among their starting 5, pitching is just that short in the major leagues. There is a genuine quality control problem that is holding up Major League Baseball. Furthermore,
Well, George,
well, I just
go
wanted to add, furthermore, baseball is prosperous now. It is, the fans are coming out, the quality is good, and baseball is figuring, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
well, that's all right. That's a conservative's point of view. The cynic in me, however, says that the reason baseball really doesn't want to expand is because they have a very nice television contract, and to add new members of the lodge would merely scratch the dollars out in a few more places. It's better to keep a large pile, isn't it?
Well, there is that, but on the other hand, remember, to get into this party, you're going to have to pay a big admissions fee, so they're going to get some of that money back. Second, this is a 4-year contract, and in fact, they're going to be, it's going to take 2 or 3 years to get expansion underway anyway, so the life of this contract is going to be just about over by the time expansion occurs.
George Will, thank you very much. I encourage everyone to read your book. It's a delightful book, and it's obviously written by a man who knows the game of baseball. Enjoy the game with your son tonight.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, George Will. And we're back here live at Stouffer's Plaza Hotel in Cleveland. I've already mentioned our other two guests here with us live, Hal Bodley and Dave Nightingale. Dave, I'm going to start with you first because you were very opinionated today after the announcement by the National League Expansion Committee, and you're not so sure anymore that Tampa Bay really is one of the front runners. Explain why.
Well, Chris, I think that Tampa Bay is certainly one of the 3 on the short list, and I think that Denver is a lock for geographical reasons that baseball does not admit exist. But they're not going to put 2 expansion teams into one division, so you figure they're going to go west. Denver, even by our own wonderful demographics, is a better team than the better hope than Phoenix. Coming back here, I think that all things equal, that Florida would get a call over upstate New York. I am impressed right now by Bob Rich's ability to write a check for $100 million of local money in Buffalo, and I am curious about Frank Morsani and his group coming up with $100 million worth of Tampa money, not New Jersey money, Tampa money.
Well, listen, I think we have Frank Morsani with us back in Florida. Would you like to respond to that, Mr. Morsani?
Well, I'll be happy to. I disagree. I think that the finances, we do have the finances. That is not a deterrent at all to our group. I can assure you that.
And is it local money, Frank?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you, Mr. Morsani. Listen, we have to take a break right now. Hal, don't worry. We're going to well, we certainly want to have your opinion on all of this, but we're going to have to take a break right now. And then when we come back, we're going to get some input from United States Senator Connie Mack, who will be with Dick, and then we're going to come back with Hal and Dave and extend this discussion. So stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment.